This podcast discusses topics related to cults, including manipulation, psychological abuse, coercion, exploitation, and other forms of harmful behavior. Listener discretion is advised. Some episodes may contain descriptions of traumatic experiences, violence, sexual abuse, and mental health issues. If you are sensitive to these topics or have a history of trauma, please take care while listening. If you or someone you know is currently experiencing any of these experiences, please seek support from a trusted friend, family member, or the authorities. Welcome to How Did We Get Here, the podcast where we dive deep and dissect the world of infamous and current cults and unearth the hidden psyche of their leaders. I am Emily, your guide in this journey and a psych nurse by profession. That being said, I am not formally diagnosing anyone with anything on this show. I am only coming from my experience and research when I talk about mental disorders or other psychological phenomena. Every week, we will examine the often overlooked allure of the macabre that has lured countless individuals into their fold. Together, we will delve into infamous cults like the Manson family, the People's Temple, and lesser-known ones that just might be springing up in the neighborhood. In this episode, we will give a general overview of cults and their leaders. According to Oxford Languages, a cult is defined as a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. What do you think of when the word cult comes to mind? Do you think of a group of people dancing naked in the moonlight covered in blood? Do you think of a particular religion? Or do you think of those newsreels of dead bodies from Jonestown or Heaven's Gate? I remember in my college years, someone jokingly referred to me as a cultist when I waltzed into class, proudly wearing the letters of my sorority on my shirt. I didn't pay much mind to them back then, but now, after I've researched cults, I wonder if we normal people really know what makes a cult a cult. In order to understand what a cult is, we need to examine the characteristics that define a cult. Let's start with the first characteristic. 1. Charismatic leader. Cults often have a charismatic and authoritarian leader who exerts significant influence over members. When I think of a cult leader, a particular pair of dark sunglasses comes to mind. Jim Jones not only held the minds and heart of his people, whether by religious devotion or pure fear, but he also held prominent figures of his time in his pocket. He was a significant figure in the government before he zipped off to South America to avoid scandal. The second characteristic of a cult is an exclusive belief system. Cults typically provide an exclusive belief system or ideology, often at odds with mainstream beliefs. An excellent example of this exclusive belief system is that of Heaven's Gate. Marshall Applewhite, or Doe, believed that he was an alien evolved beyond humankind and he was sent to Earth to help others evolve. He and his partner, Bonnie Lou Nettles, or T, had strict behavior guidelines that basically made you deny your humanity to become an alien and accept to the next level. Doe touted that his class was the last bus out of society. The next characteristic of a cult is isolation. Cults isolate their members from the outside world, both physically and emotionally, to maintain control over their thoughts and actions. A common misconception is that all cults are like this, but if we look at the People's Temple, it wasn't always that way. The People's Temple was very prominent in Indiana and parts of California when they were first active, and these big movements were used by politicians. The last years of the People's Temple come to mind when I think of the isolation. The compound in Guyana called Jonestown was far away from where anyone could reach you, unless you're willing to book it through endless miles of jungle to escape if the armed guards didn't get you first. Your mail was censored, your goods were taken, and your passport was locked up, so there was very little hope of getting help. There was no phone or radio to reach out to unless you got through Jim Jones and his armed guards and his team of nurses. The fourth characteristic of a cult is control tactics. Cults use various tactics such as manipulation, coercion, and indoctrination to keep members obedient and loyal. I recently watched a documentary on Netflix about the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. Their leader, Warren Jeffs, had control over every aspect of his followers' lives, including their marriages. From what I remember, the women were not allowed to wear red and had to have hair in braids. He also trained his people to never question him. He had a phrase called "keep sweet," which is a thought-stopping technique. Instead of questioning him, you would say that to yourself to stop your thoughts. The fifth characteristic of a cult is financial exploitation. Many cults exploit their members financially, often through demands for donations, tithes, and other forms of financial commitment. Scientology is a good example of this. My aunt's husband told me of his brief time in the organization. My first question for him was, how much money did you spend during your time there? And his answer was $80,000. Just imagine that much money just being given away just because someone's promising you eternity. I know that's almost what I make in a year. The sixth and final characteristic of a cult is group identity. Cults foster a strong sense of group identity and belonging among members, often to the point where the group becomes the primary source of social support and validation. In Heaven's Gate, members called themselves the class, and each individual person was this vehicle. It kind of reminds me of in Marine Corps boot camp, wherein recruits, they wouldn't say I, they would say this recruit. Just to take away that sense of identity, that you were part of a whole. And that's what Heaven's Gate tried to do. Heaven's Gate riffed off of things from Star Trek, namely the Borg, for their belief system. Being part of a collective was what they wanted, and it would strip you of your identity and make you more dependent on your leader. These are 6 characteristics that define a cult. Join me next week as we dive deeper into the world of infamous cult leaders and their followers. We'll be talking about Charles Manson and his family. Thank you for listening to How Did We Get Here, the podcast where we dissect the world of infamous and current cults.